When I was doing a Fox interview one morning at prime time at 6:15 a.m. when the rest of the world is asleep, and they wanted this 2-minute special on prayer. And one of them looked at me and said, what is prayer about? You keep asking and asking and you don't always get what you want. How do you deal with that? I said, ma'am, that's not what prayer is. Prayer is not so much you trying to change the will of God as much as God conditions your heart to receive His will for your life. And wow, you'd think you'd come up with some great nugget. People from all over, wow. I said, did you not know that? That prayer is the process by which He shapes this heart to receive His will. And the more you pray, the more you get into tune with the living God. And so He chooses an individual, prioritizes mission by prayer. And so you see your heart and you ultimately become the dream of God. I love biographies. One of the first things I did when I came to the West is buy all the books on biographies that I could. And the ones that really fascinated me were people like David Brainerd and E.M. Bounds, those who wrote so beautifully on prayer, because I needed help in that area. I wanted to know how to do this right, what prayer really is intended to be. If you tell me what your prayer life is like, I will tell you what your walk with God is like. It's as simple as that. You tell me what your prayer life is like, I will tell you what your walk with God is like. And so we see a person, a priority of a mission. Third, we see how he pondered in proximity. He went close. This fascinates me. I'll tell you why it does. Nehemiah is a builder, okay? He's not a preacher. He's called to build the walls. And he's bringing all this material with him, courtesy of the king. And all of those who are coming alongside him. And he's going to face a lot of opposition. There were those who were going to lure him into a setting where they could kill him and get rid of him. And there's one moment before he builds where he says this, all of you back off. I'm going to go alone now. I want to see the ruins all by myself. You have to get close if God is going to shape your call and give you the right kind of burden. Many of you know my daughter Naomi. She works in the rescuing women in the sex trafficking industry. And I remember once she went to one country I will not name. I didn't even know she was there. But she had to put on a hijab to get there. And she's a wee little girl. And she was being driven all alone by this one gentleman. You know whom I'm talking about. Some of you are from that country. And he was driving her a long way and he was very tired at the wheel, late at night. And he said, if you don't mind, I really need to sleep because I don't want to have an accident with you in the car. And so this wee little girl is sitting in the back seat in a strange country. And the gentleman driving her is a pastor, a wonderful man. Some of you know him. Sound asleep. And she said, Dad, I was getting more scared by the minute. And she never even told me she'd gone there. It's only after she got out of the country she told me that. I said, what on earth were you doing? Why did you go there? Naomi is an apologist. You never win an argument with her. She looked at me, she said, Dad, when we were young, you used to go to places that we were afraid for you to go. And when we asked you why you go there, you said you have to trust God. She said, Dad, it's your turn now. It's your turn now. And if you want to rescue women from the sex trafficking industry, she said to me, you've got to see them eyeball to eyeball. You've got to see the pain in their eyes if you really want to hear what it is that's going on. So she goes to Amsterdam. The red light are on there. And all of a sudden, she'll go in with her Bible. And the signal will be given that this person is now occupied, but she's actually talking to Naomi. Naomi will share Christ with them. Naomi will give a Bible to them so that they know this little girl, when she comes, she is coming there to rescue them from those who are plundering them. She gets close. She gets close. And if you really want to help your people, you have to get close. Sit across a table and listen to them. Listen to their heartaches. You know, Louis is one of the best exponents and expounders of methods to reach this generation. And what he said this morning is true. He'd rather be with them than with anyone else. You have to be with them. You have to hear them. If we are reaching people at a university level, we have to hear the skeptic. We have to hear the professors. We have to hear what it is they have to say. And if you don't get close, you will never, ever break through the barricades of the heart. So wherever you are working, get close. And you know what? Those of you who are not in a pastoral world but happen to be in a business world, get close to your friends and ask them the right questions so that they know you actually care. And when they are hurting the most, be there with them, because when they hurt the most without God, you be the one who will come to their minds. You be the one who they'll call and say, I need to speak to them. I need to talk to this individual. Nehemiah gets close and decides what it is he needs. So the prioritize of a mission, the primacy of prayer, pondered in proximity. Thirdly, he avoided the paralysis of pessimism. You know, there are people I know who, if you're with them for half an hour, they'll discourage you about everything in the world. Yeah, but, it's one of these yeah, but people. So that you say all the positive, yeah, but, it's not like this. Somewhere between a ridiculous optimism and a pathetic pessimism is a stark realism. Get to be real and understand what it is we're actually dealing with and who it is we're actually dealing with. Some of the toughest people I have dealt with are those whom I thought would never, ever come to Christ, but they have, and their lives have been remarkably changed. I could give you illustration after illustration after illustration. I remember one time I was in New Brunswick, Canada. It was in the 70s. At that time there were only 500 Indians in Toronto. So you can imagine how few there were in New Brunswick. Toronto had only 500 Indians. Today Toronto has 500,000 Indians. So I was speaking in this little town in New Brunswick with my wife Margie. We used to pack our bags and drive for weeks at a time. It was in the early 70s. And so at that time, anybody who knew another Indian would invite that Indian to have dinner with you in the hopes that you would convert that Indian for them. Everywhere you go, oh, you're an Indian. I know an Indian, I've forgotten his name, but I think the last name was Singh or something like that. Would you happen to know him? So I'm in New Brunswick, and they invite this guy. And I said to myself, this is not a dinner for me. This is them wanting me to reach this guy for Christ. And you know how hard that is when you know you've been set up? And he knew he'd been set up. And I knew I'd been set up. I didn't enjoy the meal one bit. So they were shocked. I never said a thing to him about what the gospel was all about. He said, so you're a Christian? I said, yes. And then as he started talking, the opportunity came for me to just share my testimony. All the while I'd said nothing. So they said, how did you become a Christian? So we did, and talked our way. And you know what? The people were very disappointed that I didn't give him the opportunity to sign a card and come forward. I let it go. Years went by. Years. I get a telephone call at home, and it's this guy. He said, do you remember me, Mr. Zacharias? I said, yes, sir, I sure do remember you. He said, I'm here at the Princess Margaret Hospital in Toronto. I would love for you to come and pay me a visit. As soon as he said Princess Margaret Hospital, I knew that was a cancer hospital. So I said, what's your room number there? He gave it to me, I drove in. And I went up to the room, I opened the door, looked inside, there was a man there, I closed the door, and then I heard him saying, "Ravi." I opened the door again. I couldn't recognize him. He wasn't even a shadow of himself. He'd lost all his hair, cheeks were sunk, he looked a pathetic piece of humanity. I looked at him, I didn't know what to say. He said, "Yeah, this is what's left of me." He said, "I don't want to leave this world without saying something to you. I want to thank you for the sensitivity you had when we had dinner in New Brunswick years ago. You didn't dump the whole bucket load of goods on me, but I want you to know now, after our talk, I began my search and I found Jesus Christ, and I'm a follower of him as I'm about to face him now." You see, you have to find out where the person is, listen to them, and have hope that God does transform people. We are not the only ones he uses. He uses many, many others along the way. And when you look at Nehemiah's building of the wall, here's what you see. Each family built the portion of the wall in front of their own home. Do you see how important that is? Train your people to be builders. Train your people to do their portion and to do their responsibility. I find it absolutely fascinating how wonderful it was that he completed the wall in 52 days and decided the time had come to return. God used a civil engineer, and when the time came to dedicate it, it wasn't Nehemiah who led them in prayer, but it was Ezra. Nehemiah took the step back. He knew he was a builder. Ezra was the priest. Ezra led the people, and each person abided in his calling and did what God had called them to do. I just want to close with a couple of illustrations here, and that's critical. A man who had a great impact on my life was a man called Fred David. Many of you may have known Fred David from the Youth of Christ days in the 60s. And Fred was a wonderful guy, loved us very much, and he's the one who brought the Bible into the hospital room when I had tried to take my own life. About a few years ago, I don't even want to guess or I'll be wrong, maybe 6, 7 years ago, I was in Calgary, Alberta, and I was speaking, and a man by the name of John Tabe, tall Canadian, who'd spent several years working with Youth for Christ in India, came and had lunch with me. John was from Calgary. And we sat down and he said, "Ravi, I never dreamed when I first met you what God was going to do in your life. You know, we knew Mr. Tabe quite well." He said, "But I've always wanted to tell you something. When you were in the hospital and we heard about it, I called Fred and I said, 'Fred, you've chatted with Ravi before. You know him better. Take a Bible to him.' And he said, 'I just want you to know, because it means so much to me now, that I put that thought into Fred David's mind to take a Bible to you and come and give that to you.' Now every time I hear your testimony or your podcast and you refer to that Bible that changed your life, I just start crying thinking how wonderful it was that God prompted my heart to tell Fred to go and take that Bible to you. And Fred honored that request, and he said, 'Now here you are, after all these years, making a difference in our world.' I started crying, and he started crying. He was in his veteran years. And then he said to me, 'I just have one request of you.' I said, 'What's that, Mr. Tabe?' And he phoned later and confirmed it. He said, 'Will you preach at my funeral?' Because if there was anything God accomplished in my life, it was to be in Delhi when you and Sundar Krishnan gave your lives to Jesus Christ. I cannot believe I had a share in those conversions. Will you please preach at my funeral?" A man builds a wall. A man raises a family. A man sends a Bible. a woman like Amy Carmichael comes and touches the masses in India. Pandita Ramabai was moved by God to do so much. We so often talk of William Booth. The inspiration behind William Booth was really his wife, Catherine Booth. The inspiration between John and Charles Wesley was Susanna Wesley, a mother of 19 children who raised 2 giants to change history and get the church singing some hymns and listening to messages. You are an individual equipped to do what no one else can do. And so it was in the days of Rome, when the gladiatorial fights were being fought in the arenas and they were being killed for following Christ. And there was an old man in a small village. His name was Telemachus or Telemachus. And Telemachus was prompted by God to go to Rome. And he didn't want to go to Rome. But he comes to Rome and he's prompted to go into the arena. And he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The bloodletting orgies that were going on and people cheering on the butchering of somebody else. And Telemachus stands up with his voice in that amphitheatrical setting and cries out just one line, "In the name of Christ, forbear. In the name of Christ, stop this thing." There was silence, and then a huge roar of mocking laughter. Telemachus is going down the steps shouting out, "In the name of Christ, stop this. In the name of Christ, stop this." An old man from a little village. And as he got into the middle, somebody shouted, "Run him through." And as the pointed edge of a blade goes through him, he buckles on his knees, and one more time he says, "In the name of Christ, stop this thing." And the Book of Martyrs tells us this. Many other things came together, but the death of Telemachus sealed the opposition so that never was there again a gladiatorial fight in the Roman arenas. One man. So as you leave us tomorrow, I just ask you this. One person is an army. It's an army for God. But you have to recognize He calls you. Prioritize it by prayer. Know that you have to get in proximity. Do not succumb to the paralysis of pessimism, because God will give you the strength to bring peace to the people. That's what it is all about.